And what's super interesting about joy is that it is the drive behind all the other emotions, anger, fear, and sadness. Because really, we're always trying to move away from pain and move towards pleasure or joy. And so if we're going to do that, we have to have fear so that we can find our blind spots. We have to have sadness so that we can see that something is closing and something else is about to open up. And then we have to feel that anger so that we can make decisions, so that people can see that we're serious, that we can set boundaries, because that's always what we're trying to do.
Are you ready to bring your dream body and health into life, but just can't seem to keep the motivation going? And is it finally time to address the self-sabotage and the unwanted eating behaviors such as binge eating, emotional eating, and nighttime eating that you know are getting in the way of your goals? Do you ever wonder what it would take for you to feel in control of your rituals so that you can stay consistent and see results? Welcome to this week's special Make Peace with Food Minisode on the Fall in Love with Fitness podcast, where you'll learn how to overcome unwanted eating behavior and other self-sabotaging habits by shifting your nervous system so that your body works with you instead of against you. I'm your host, Shaban, and with each episode, I am honored to be your coach and guide in the journey to make peace with food and find food and body freedom so that struggle with weight is a thing of the past. When you tune in every Thursday on the Fall in Love with Fitness podcast, you'll catch the latest conversation on unwanted eating behaviors and learn how to shift the nervous system, rewire the brain to new patterns, and end the food and body obsession so you finally feel relaxed and no longer confused around food. Now, before we begin, I want to quickly invite you to grab a free copy of my Food Freedom ebook that I have for you at makepeacewithfood.com. And if you find that this conversation resonates with you today, then I also want to invite you to join our free Make Peace with Food Facebook community at myfoodfreedomlifestyle.com, where you can connect with me and my team directly. The links are in the show notes. And of course, if you know somebody who you feel could benefit from these conversations and discussions, make sure to share this podcast with them too. All right, athletes, now let's get into it.
Today, I'm going to be talking to you about how to stop emotional eating. And I'm going to tell you right now that it has absolutely nothing to do with willpower, determination, finding that nutritionist who's going to give you a more rigid meal plan, finding that magical superfood from the Amazon forest. It's not going to be any of that. But what we're actually going to be talking about is emotions and what is behind these emotions. Because I think by now you have an idea that if you've been in this space for a while, if you've tried different methods, if you've tried to use discipline, willpower, all those things to try to stop emotional eating, you notice that you may have a pretty good streak for a while because discipline only lasts so long. But then you'll notice that as soon as something happens in your life, you are triggered and you're right back where you started. And then now there's an additional emotion. And you know what that emotion is? The emotion of guilt and shame and frustration and disappointment because you made these big, big promises to yourself. And now you are back struggling with a new meal plan, maybe now looking for new ideas. And most likely you've already jumped on a new diet, trying some new things. So you may have heard me also say this before, that if we repeat the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result, it's called insanity. And that's not my quote. I know you've likely heard it from other sources. But I think today could be the day where we now can become aware of whether or not we want to continue to repeat certain things that we've always been doing in the past, or if we're open to actually exploring the root cause of the issue. So why do we emotionally eat? How can we stop it? Well, we emotionally eat because all we're doing is seeking pleasure. And that's so simple. But here's the way our human behavior is. We unconsciously move away from pain and move towards pleasure. That's what we actually do all day long. Every single decision that you make in your life is moving you away from pain and moving you towards pleasure. And now when I'm talking about pain and pleasure, I'm not talking about physical pain that's torturous. And when I talk about pleasure, it also doesn't have to be something super, for example, joyful or something that is so blowing your mind in the moment. It's just We're looking for ease. We're looking for alignment. We're looking for things that don't take so much effort. We're looking for kind of avoiding any emotional disruption, any discomfort and pain. And that's what we base our decisions on. And so when we emotionally eat, what happens is we feel a particular emotion. And that's, by the way, different for each person. For some of us, it could be stress that drives us maybe to eat. It could be sadness that drives us to eat. And for someone else, it could be the exact opposite. Noticing that when you experience those emotions, you actually may feel a little bit of lack of appetite. And so you have to really understand that this conversation is very relative to the person. There's no black or white formula here. You have to just take a step back and recognize for yourself, what are the emotions that do drive me to eat? Is it sadness? Is it fear? Is it anger? Or is it joy? Because it could also be joy. It doesn't necessarily have to be an uncomfortable emotion. Notice sometimes what happens when you're celebrating, you get some really good news, or you finally pass an exam, or it's Friday night and you feel immense joy right away. It could be that gateway to open up to emotional eating or uncontrollable eating. And so there are only 4 emotions that we actually experience. So those are the 4 that I just mentioned to you: fear, sadness, anger, and joy. Everything else that we experience is going to be a combination of 2 or more of those emotions. So let's talk about guilt. And I'm going to share with you the emotions I experience when I feel guilty. Okay. And now I want you to plug in the emotions that come up for you, because they might be a slightly different combination. But anytime I feel guilty, I do feel fear and I feel anger. I'm afraid of something happening. I'm afraid of maybe a consequence that I don't want to happen, or I'm angry, let's say, at something that I did or something I didn't do. And so that's generally the combination or the melange of emotions that tend to sit with me when I feel guilt. And so if you really want to overcome emotional eating, you first have to recognize what that emotion is that comes up for you and find the combination that makes up that emotion from those base 4. And then now let's look at those base 4. So every single one of those emotions: fear, anger, joy, okay? And what was the last one? Sadness, yes. So any of those emotions are going to give you a particular message. And if you understand the message and you're able to do something with it, it doesn't just become this feeling that's just sitting in our body. It just actually becomes this feeling that we can take action with. And so let's talk about sadness, for example. When we experience sadness, like when we've lost somebody that we love, that's a very painful emotion. Wouldn't you agree? I remember I felt that so intensely when my mom passed away. But sadness is this message that we're given, that our body is giving to us, that something is coming to an end and something else is about to begin. And if you notice all the times in your life where you did experience sadness, you notice that there was a chapter closing and there was something else that was just about to open. And so we can use that information to really start to put things in place in our life without actually having to sit in this emotion. We can just recognize that these emotions are messages, and we just need to decipher the messages. We need to understand why we have these emotions. We're always going to have an emotion anytime we have a thought. Anytime something happens in our life, in our environment, we're going to trigger a thought and then we're going to experience an emotion. And so instead of spending the rest of our life avoiding them and turning to food or alcohol or marijuana or even overspending to try to avoid these emotions, what would happen if instead we try to decipher these emotions? All right, so we went through sadness. What about fear? Fear is that emotion that helps us reveal our blind spots. It's that emotion that helps us really start to notice things in our environment that maybe we didn't notice, that maybe if we do notice, we could start to take action with. We could start to maybe be more resourceful from. And so fear is an important emotion. It just brings us on guard for being able to really notice the things that maybe we're not actually noticing at the moment. So fear is that blind spot detector in the car, for example. And then anger. Well, anger is that emotion that we need so that we can take action, so that we can set boundaries, so that we can tell people to stop doing the things that they're doing. And so we need anger in order for us sometimes to take action and to move forward and to make changes in our lives. Just think about what happens when we move from being a victim to now being, let's say, a victor. What we end up doing is we move away from fear, so things happening to us, to suddenly deciding to take that and then take action with it and set boundaries and to really make sure that we are heard, that we are understood. So it's almost like we are taking control. So anger is a very important emotion. And then joy, of course. Well, joy is our default emotion. That's what we were actually wanting to be experienced at all times. And what's super interesting about joy is that it is the drive behind all the other emotions: anger, fear, and sadness. Because really, we're always trying to move away from pain and move towards pleasure or joy. And so if we're going to do that, we have to have fear so that we can find our blind spots. We have to have sadness so that we can see that something is closing and something else is about to open up. And then we have to feel that anger so that we can make decisions, so that people can see that we're serious, that we can set boundaries, because that's always what we're trying to do. And so if you're listening today and this sounds interesting to you, you want to learn a little bit more around how to decode your emotions, how to start moving away from emotional eating, then it has to start there. It's not by discipline. It's not by willpower. It's not by more avoidance or numbing these emotions. It's by simply understanding them, breaking them down, and decoding them. And this is what we help you do in our Make Peace with Food program. We help you uncover what's behind all this disordered relationship with food and also this unwanted eating behavior. For some of us, it could be emotional eating. For some of us, it could be binge eating or stress eating. And without giving so many labels, what we want to say is that the drive or the trigger behind it looks a little bit different. And so if you're curious to even just know whether or not that is the case for you, I would love to invite you on a free 30-minute discovery call. So again, this is a no obligation call, but wouldn't you want to at least know if this is the case? And wouldn't you feel like you owe it to yourself at this point to just at least be curious instead of maybe trying another diet? Again, we know we're not insane. We're not going to keep trying things that never worked in the past. What if we actually address the root cause of the issue for once? What if we actually looked for what is constantly driving me to get off that wagon? How can I find my center? And it is so simple. The moment you find the root cause and you're able to shift the nervous system from what we call protection mode to safety mode, it all changes. You no longer have that drive for food. You no longer crave all those irresistible foods that you're currently craving. You're no longer engaging in these unwanted eating behaviors. And then what do you think happens as a side effect of you not overeating anymore? What do you think happens as a side effect of you not always turning to food every time you're feeling uncomfortable? That's right. You won't need to diet. You won't need to be restrictive. You won't need to exercise yourself to exhaustion. It's going to be very simple because you will no longer have that drive to food any longer. So I hope that has served you today. I hope that you found value in our conversation today. And again, I'm always a resource for you. If you need anything, I am here. You got this.
Thank you for listening to this week's Make Peace with Food Minisode on the Fall in Love with Fitness podcast. If this has resonated with you today, I want to invite you to subscribe to the show so you never miss a beat. And if you know someone who could benefit from this conversation, then please share this episode with them. Let's work together to help as many people as possible make peace with food and fall in love with fitness. And by the way, I need to mention that if you rate and review this podcast on iTunes and send over the screenshot to Sherry at sherryshaban.com, you'll receive a $500 voucher to join me at one of my upcoming retreats or to use it in our Make Peace with Food coaching program. And don't forget to visit myfoodfreedomlifestyle.com to join the free Facebook group for more resources. And remember, athlete, you are an inspiration. I cannot wait to hear your story.